Lesson 1, Part B, expressing a mixed radical as an entire radical. So our goal is for the coefficient to be 1 in front of our radical sign by moving the numerical coefficient under the radical sign and becoming part of the radicand. So what we're really actually going to be doing is the reverse of what we were doing before. So for our examples, it says write the following as an entire radical. Entire means everything under the radical sign. Okay. So no coefficient. As we go to look at this, everything's going to be underneath our radical sign. So our first one is for square root 5. So if we look at it, we have an index of 2. So there's our index of 2, which means when that 4 moved out, we'd had to have a circled group of 2 of them. So we're going to go and we're going to write our radical sign. Moving that 4 underneath, we need 2 of them, so we're going to go 4 times 4, and then we're going to multiply it by whatever was already under the radical sign. In this case, it was a 5. So 4 times 4 times 5 is 80. 4 square root 5 is equal to the square root of 80. Our next example has us looking at a cube root. So we have 7 times the cube root of 10. Now 7 cube root 10, this time our index is 3. So when we were making our mixed radical, we needed a group of 3 to come out to make that 7 on the outside. So that means as we go to put the 7 underneath, we're going to need 3 7s. So there's our radical sign with the index of 3. So our 3 7s, 7 times 7 times 7, and then times the radicand that was already there, which in this case was 10. So as we go to look at it, notice that when I originally wrote that radical sign, it wasn't quite long enough, but I extended it so that it made sure that we had all the numbers that belonged under it underneath. Now, if we go and multiply these guys together, we're going to end up with the cube root of 3,430. And there's our final answer in entire form. Our next example has us looking at negative numbers. So we know that a negative number and a positive number are not the same thing. We also know that you can't square root a negative number. So for example, the square root of negative 4 we can't do because there's no way for us to get 2 numbers that are exactly the same that multiply to give us a negative value. So as we go to look at this one, we have negative 5 square root 2. It has an index of 2, so let's put our little index in. So we have an index of 2, which means when we move our 5 underneath, we will need 2 of them. If we move the negative sign with the 5, negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive answer. It's positive 25. Well, negative and positive isn't the same. And we can't just put one negative underneath because we can't square root a negative number. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave that negative sign out front, and then the rest of it is going to continue as we did in the previous examples. So index of 2 means we need 2 of the 5s, so we're going to times 2 5s together, and then times that by the radicand we had already underneath. So we still have our negative value, so our number has not changed. And when we go 5 times 5 times 2, we get 50. There is our final answer. For our last example, we have a negative cube root And we can tackle it the same way we did with the square root. So we can leave the negative on the outside, write our radical with the index of 3, and because the index was 3, we're going to put 3 2's underneath the radical sign. So we will go 2 times 2 times 2, and then we're going to multiply it by the radicand that was already there. So multiply it by 5 and extend the radical sign if necessary. As we go to do this, when we multiply these guys all together, we find that we have a final answer of negative cube root of 40. Our other option, as we go to look at it, if you think about what the radical sign is saying, a cube root would be what is a number times itself 3 times that will get us the radicand. And for a negative, we can find a number times itself 3 times that will come out to a negative answer. So as a result, we can also do this instead. So we could go negative 2 cube root 5, and that would be equal to bringing our negative underneath. We would have negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times 5, all underneath our radical sign. And then when we multiply this together, negative times the negative is a positive. Positive times the negative is a negative. 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 is 40, all under the cube root sign. So that is our other option as far as dealing with a negative and a cube root. Now, you only have to do one of them. I just want you to be able to recognize that both of them are correct and both of them are the same, in case in a multiple choice question you see one or the other. So in summary, these are the steps that we've been doing to take a mixed radical and write it as an entire radical. We wrote the radical sign with the coefficient under it as many times as indicated by the index. So if the index was 2, we wrote that number twice under the radical sign. If the index was 3, we wrote that number 3 times, making sure to put time signs between the numbers. The second thing we did was we multiplied that by the original radicand, so by the number that was already under the radical sign. And then our last one was to multiply the values together to get a single number under the radical sign, so a single number for the radicand.